Sergei Prokofiev is one of the most notable composers of post-impressionistic piano music. All of his piano sonatas remain in the canon of concertized works, as do most of his short pieces, such as the toccata, sarcasms, and other sets. Prokofiev has another genre of solo piano works that are less famous, but no less well-crafted, his piano transcriptions. Prokofiev transcribed his own works for solo piano, including selections from his ballet Cinderella and his operas A Love of Three Oranges and War and Peace. The most famous and frequently played of his transcriptions are those from his ballet Romeo and Juliet. The music from this ballet contains many iconic themes in 20th century classical music, including selections like Montagues and Capulets, Masques, and Mercutio. This work comes during a unique period in Prokofiev's output, where he favored programmatic genre like film and ballet to the larger symphonic and sonata-type works for which he is more famous. In this period, Prokofiev simplified his style to highlight melody instead of brutality and consonance instead of dissonance. And when he did exhibit his harsher style, he could do so under the guise of programmatic description. Prokofiev called this stylistic change a new simplicity. Through the Romeo and Juliet piano transcriptions, I look to illustrate these stylistic changes while demonstrating Prokofiev's 5 lines in order to gain a better understanding of how Prokofiev's simpler style compares to the hallmark compositions of his pianistic output. Prokofiev's style is often described as having 5 specific style traits, or lines as he described them. These lines include lyrical, neoclassical, toccata, modern, and grotesque. I will illustrate the evolution of these lines in 2 ways. The first through the traditional canon of Prokofiev's music, and the second through Romeo and Juliet. The point of this exercise is to show the raw essence of each line and how they changed in a new simplicity. Please be aware the use of these traits are fluid. A piece is never comprised of a single style trait. As I proceed, please reference the handout provided for short descriptions of each stylistic trait and how they were used in each movement I will play. Prokofiev said that his lyricism appears first as a thoughtful and meditative mood, not always associated with the melody. This meditative mood is often manifested in lyrical, polyphonic textures that are orchestral in nature. When Prokofiev uses a lyrical melody, contrapuntal, heavily chromatic lines typically accompany them. This example from the first movement of Prokofiev's 7th piano sonata illustrates his use of lyricism. In the second theme of the sonata, Prokofiev sets a melancholy, meditative mood. Note the chromatic angularity of the melodic line and polyphonic treatment, resulting in a complex texture. I will now play example 1, lyricism in the second theme of Prokofiev's 7th piano sonata. neoclassical element is found in his use of traditional forms, ornamentations, and motivic gestures that refer to the composition of previous musical eras. Taken from his love of Beethoven sonatas, Prokofiev typically composed in traditional formal structures, including sonatas, ternary dances, binary, and through composed forms. This clear use of form is ubiquitous in his compositional output. Therefore, it will be unnecessary to demonstrate this at this time. He also uses traditional musical gestures, many of which are best exemplified in Romeo and Juliet. Frequent use of scales, turns, and other ornaments illustrate his admiration for previous composers like Bach and Beethoven. Prokofiev's Opus 12 exemplifies his appreciation for previous composers. It contains 10 pieces, all of which are traditional dance movements, including a gavotte, rigodon, and march, among many other movements. The prelude from Opus 12 illustrates the neoclassical trait well. The right hand plays a fast Alberti-type accompaniment, while the left is playing parallel thirds. In his use of the neoclassical, Prokofiev often favors C major, a popular key in the early classical era, which is exemplified in this piece. The harmonies in the opening of this piece are primarily diatonic. Notice the circle of fifths progression at the end of the example, an idiomatic musical device of the Baroque and classical eras. Be aware that the neoclassical trait of Prokofiev is rarely demonstrated in a manner as consonant as this example. In fact, the middle section of this work, which I will not be playing, is quite dissonant. I will now play example 2, Neoclassicism illustrated in Prokofiev's Opus 12 Prelude. Pervasive in Prokofiev's music. Developed from his admiration for the Schumann toccata, this element of his style can be seen in a churning, mechanical character often found in his accompaniments and textures. In his traditional style, this use of motor can often comprise the majority of the texture, including the theme. The finale of the 7th Piano Sonata, in 7/8 meter with noticeable accents, serves as a perfect example. Listen for the dry mechanical octaves in chords in both hands, creating a texture that is comprised of constant 8th note chords. Note the left-hand ostinato that contains a particularly machine-like accent found on the offbeats. I will now play example 3, the opening of the 3rd movement of Prokofiev's 7th Piano Sonata. Prokofiev refers to the modern element as the crudeness of his harmonies that developed later into a language in which to express powerful emotions through new departures in melody, orchestration, and drama. The modern element of Prokofiev's music is illustrated by the use of harsh dissonances, chromatic harmonies, and angular chromatic accompaniment patterns that create dissonances with the melody. which was demonstrated in the earlier example illustrating lyricism. While Prokofiev's music is not atonal, it does contain passages of extreme chromaticism. Perhaps one of the most interesting works using the modern line is the Diabolical Suggestion, Opus 4, number 4. This work is known for its harsh, crude harmonies and biting angular themes. Based purely on harmonic content, this piece can be very jarring. Listen for the minor ninths in the left hand, accompanied by clusters of chords in the right hand. Also listen for Prokofiev's use of chromatic scales and figures. I will now play example 4, a recording of a section of the Diabolical Suggestion. Prokofiev described the characteristics of his grotesque line as whimsicality, laughter, and mockery, all of which are present frequently in his music. Grotesque refers specifically to distortion and mockery of expected musical events. A good example is when we hear Haydnesque ornaments that are distorted through dissonance and angularity to create a jarring effect. These include distortion to melodies, rumbling low bass notes, flippant rhythmic figures, and loud percussive chords. As you most surely observed from the previous piece, the grotesque and modern line can be very difficult to differentiate. However, the grotesque line refers specifically to the use of gesture, while the modern element refers to chromatic harmonies and dissonances. Few of Prokofiev's works typify the use of disturbing gesture better than his Sarcasms, Opus 17. This work, which exemplifies the enfant terrible image, is one of the most harsh, angry works in Prokofiev's music. The first sarcasm illustrates this with its loud, taunting opening gesture that features a repeated melodic tritone. Notice the harsh chords and the angular, distorted melodic lines. The articulations are particularly percussive at times, utilizing brutal accents throughout the melodic line. Notice the quick, flippant, and trill-like rhythmic gestures that also typify the grotesque. I will now play example 5, the opening of Prokofiev's Sarcasm, number 1.